the Japanese apartment where everyone dies. I'm originally from the Tohoku region of northern Japan, but for university, I moved to the Kanto region, the area surrounding Tokyo. A few years later, my younger brother decided to attend a university nearby, so we started looking for an apartment to share. I have a chronic illness, though, so I had to leave the entire apartment hunt up to him. Then one day he called me, practically buzzing with excitement. I found an amazing place. I went to see it with high hopes. It was a perfectly ordinary-looking condominium, located about a 5-minute bus ride from the station. The apartment itself was a corner unit on the 3rd floor of a 6-story building. It had great sunlight and a spacious 3-bedroom layout. Since it was a privately owned condo being rented out, it was very well built and at the time still relatively new. But what truly shocked me was the rent. A place like this would have easily cost over 100,000 yen a month back then. That's about $1,000. But the rent for this room was 100 yen, a single dollar. It was what's known in Japan as a jikobuken, a stigmatized property. When we asked the real estate agent what had happened, he told us a story that was hard to believe. There had been 7 separate incidents where people had died in that very room. It started with a woman who hanged herself. Next, an elderly couple took their own lives with charcoal briquettes. The third was a young couple. The woman stabbed her boyfriend to death. He didn't tell me how the 4th and 5th people died, only that they did. The 6th was an incident I actually remembered seeing on the news. A mother murdered her 2 children before taking her own life in the room. And the 7th? He didn't give me the details, but again, someone had died. This was a room where, if you lived there, you were guaranteed to die. We were scheduled to see another property that day. The agent mentioned it was also a stigmatized property, but with a rent of 0 yen. Since I hadn't been able to help with the search, I couldn't protest too strongly. Still, I had to ask my brother, "Why do you only pick places like this?" He just grinned. "Come on, it's cheap." The agent began to go over the contract. "You can live here for a year and a half for 100 yen a month. If you decide to stay longer, the rent will be half of the standard market price." To make it even creepier, he told us that the apartments above, below, and on both sides of this one were all empty. "See?" I said, trying to reason with my brother. "There's a reason it's so cheap." But he just waved it off. "I don't see ghosts or anything. I'll be fine." And so, we moved in. On our very first night, I had my first terrifying experience. I was sleeping in the Japanese-style tatami room next to the living room when I was jolted awake, feeling like I was being strangled. I forced my eyes open and saw a woman with long hair choking me. I couldn't breathe. I struggled desperately until my right arm came free. I swung it wildly, punching at her with everything I had. I felt a bizarre, squishy impact, like hitting a water pillow. Instantly, the pressure on my body vanished. I kept punching until she was gone, and the next thing I knew, it was morning. I couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality. Then came the cliché. I looked in the mirror, and the dark red handprints were clearly visible on my neck. I remember being strangely impressed, thinking, wow, this stuff really happens. At that moment, though, I wasn't scared. A weird confidence took over. If I could hit her once, I thought, I can do it again. Some time passed. One day, I invited my friends from the university choir club for a small party. There were 8 of us, but we were short on cups. So I grabbed a friend and we ran down to the 100 yen shop on the building's ground floor. When we returned, chatting and laughing, we found a strange scene. Our other 6 friends were huddled in the hallway outside our front door, sitting on the floor with their knees hugged to their chests. "What's wrong?" I asked, startled. One of them looked up, his voice trembling. "Dude, what is with that apartment?" "What do you mean?" We were all in the living room, and this woman we'd never seen before just walked out of the toilet and then vanished into the wall. My first thought was, the woman who choked me. I asked, "Did she have long hair?" "No," he said. "It was short." I was floored. There was another ghost. Without thinking, I muttered, "Oh, so it's a different one." "What do you mean, a different one? You knew there was something in here." I had no choice. I showed them the marks on my neck and told them what had happened to me. 5 of them left immediately. That left just 3 of us. One of the 2 friends who stayed was a science major. He was intrigued. "This is awesome. Let's run an experiment and see if the ghost is real." We decided to use our extra cups to offer the spirit a drink. We placed 2 cups in the hallway near the toilet where she'd appeared, one with tea and one with sake. Then we waited. Whoa! When we checked a little while later, the sake was untouched, but the teacup was completely empty. "Was the ghost a minor?" my friend joked. "Or maybe she just doesn't like alcohol." His scientific curiosity was piqued. This time, he set out 3 cups, juice, sake, and tea. After a while, we checked again. Same result. Only the tea was gone. I was slowly, bizarrely, getting used to this life. But then, about 6 months in, near the end of autumn, I had an experience so chilling, it made my skin crawl. Late one night, I went to the kitchen for a drink. As I bent down to grab barley tea from the fridge, our intercom chimed. Ding dong. This may sound normal, but it was impossible. Our building has an auto-lock security door at the main entrance. No one could get to our front door without being buzzed in from downstairs first. The sound I heard was from the intercom right outside our door. As this realization hit me, I found myself frozen solid, bent over in front of the open fridge. All I could see was the refrigerator's contents and my own feet. "Who is that?" Knock, knock, knock. Then, a man's voice spoke, and a true chill went down my spine. "Pardon the intrusion so late at night." It was the voice of a calm, gentle, elderly man. This was a big apartment. The front door was far from the kitchen. There was no way I should have been able to hear a soft knock, let alone a man's quiet voice. Ding dong. "It seems you are not answering," the voice continued. "I will take my leave." That is not a person, I thought, as goosebumps erupted all over my body. I was still paralyzed with fear when a pair of polished leather dress shoes appeared on the floor right at my feet. There was no room for anyone to stand between me and the refrigerator. Then, the voice spoke again, this time from directly above my head. "My apologies, I let myself in." The voice was kind, but it filled me with a terror I can't describe. I couldn't understand everything he said, but I'll never forget the core of his message. "I have come for Mrs. So-and-so," he said. "Thanks to you, I am now able to receive her." Who is he talking about? He was here for someone I didn't even know. Well then, I shall be on my way. As he spoke, the leather shoes at my feet vanished, but I still couldn't move. Then, I saw it. A thick line of long black hair was dragged silently across the floor in front of me, from right to left, and then it too simply faded into nothing. The instant it disappeared, the paralysis released me. I could move again. For a long time after, I was reeling from the pure, primal fear of what I had just seen. Was that man a sort of grim reaper? Had he come to collect the soul of the long-haired woman who had attacked me? All I know is that I have never felt such heart-stopping terror from such a gentle voice. My brother and I moved out after the 1.5-year contract was up, right before the rent was due to increase. Some time passed. Then, one day, the real estate agent called me. "Excuse me," he said. "I was wondering if you might consider moving back in. We can keep the rent at 100 yen for you. The person who moved in after us had died. He'd slit his wrists in the bathtub." The man in the neighbor's window. This is an unforgettable experience I had a few years ago. At the time, some friends of mine had moved to Tokyo from the nearby Ibaraki prefecture. There were 3 or 4 of them, and they started sharing a house in my neighborhood. The house was in a great location, less than a 10-minute walk from the station, yet the rent was only 120,000 yen a month. A price like that should have been impossible. What's more, it was a nearly new 2-story house with a beautiful interior. It had a long, narrow shape, but it was more than spacious enough for them. They fell in love with the place, signed the lease immediately, and began their new life. That year, at the end of December, I was invited to a Christmas party at their house. A lively group of people had gathered, and we were having a good time, when one of my friends who lived there suddenly spoke up. "Oh hey, listen to this. There's something weird about this house." He went on to explain that strange, scary things had been happening ever since they moved in. For example, the house's intercom system. Normally when someone rings the doorbell, a chime sounds and the monitor inside turns on. But in this house, the chime would never ring. The monitor would just suddenly light up on its own, displaying the view outside. It started with small oddities like that, but soon, some of the residents began to see things. One night, one of the guys, let's call him B, was soaking in the first-floor bathtub. He saw a black human-like shadow fall across the frosted glass of the bathroom door. B figured it was just his housemate, K. But at that very moment, K was upstairs in the living room. Then, on another day, another resident, N, finally saw something clearly. He was sleeping in his room on the first floor. It was a sweltering summer night, and he woke up feeling restless and decided to get some water. Standing in the doorway of his room, with his back turned to him, was an old man dressed in a kimono. This is bad. The sight was so shocking that N instinctively looked away. When he snapped his head back a second later, the man was gone. N told his housemate K what he had seen. A week later, it was K's turn. He woke up in his room, completely unable to move. He was experiencing sleep paralysis. This is terrifying, he thought. Is it him? Is it the man in the kimono that N was talking about? The instant he had that thought, a man's voice whispered right next to his ear. That's right. The party was buzzing with these ghost stories, but I had to work early the next day, so I decided to leave. "Sorry guys, I've got work tomorrow. I should get going." I said my goodbyes and quickly headed to the entryway. I put on my shoes, opened the front door, and stepped outside into a blast of cold wind. I started walking away, but I felt a strange, unpleasant atmosphere. I glanced back over my shoulder, and that's when I saw him. A man was standing in the second-floor window of the house next door. That window didn't have a balcony. He was just standing there, right at the edge of the window, glaring intently at the house where the party was happening. Oh, crap, I thought. The neighbor is angry because we were being too loud. I immediately called my friends inside. "Hey, the guy next door is watching you. You should probably quiet down." But a few days later, a horrifying truth came to light. The sheer number of paranormal events in that house had made one of the party guests curious. They decided to do some research on the property. It turned out, over a decade ago, there had been a murder. But the murder hadn't happened in the house my friends were renting. It happened next door. The house where I had seen the man standing in the window that night was the actual crime scene. The perpetrator was the father of the family who had lived there. He had murdered his own mother and his wife with an axe. Afterwards, he took his own life. His son was also attacked, but managed to survive. However, when the son was discovered, part of his body had been severed. The gruesome incident was reported nationwide by the media, terrifying everyone who heard about it. It's possible that the man I saw standing motionless in the window was the ghost of the father who had committed that family murder-suicide. But that still doesn't explain the countless paranormal phenomena happening in the house my friends were renting. Is it possible for a house built next to a stigmatized property to become haunted itself? If anyone out there has had a similar experience, please, let me know. I replace wallpaper in haunted houses. I work in Shizuoka Prefecture, replacing residential wallpaper, or cloth, as we call it in the trade. In my line of work, it's not uncommon for a job to take me to what are known as stigmatized properties. And at sites like those, you sometimes encounter bizarre phenomena that defy any logical explanation. This first story happened while I was on a job in S-City, Shizuoka. The site was a classic stigmatized property. The previous resident had hanged himself in the entryway. The moment I opened the front door, a sharp, foul odor hit my nose, and there on the floor was a distinct stain where bodily fluids had soaked into the wood. Whoa, this is bad, I thought. But it was a job, so I had to go inside. I wasn't there to start the work that day, just to inspect the site, so I was alone and didn't have any of my tools. I stepped inside. The entryway opened into a dining kitchen area, and beyond that, there was a fusuma, a traditional paper-sliding door, that led to a back room. The moment I placed my hand on the fusuma to open it, something grabbed my right hand. Hard. It pulled me backward with incredible force. What? I spun around in shock, but no one was there. Yet the sensation on my right hand, I can still remember it vividly today. It felt as if I'd been grabbed by a handful of slime, but at the same time, the grip was unbelievably strong. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I was frozen to the spot, paralyzed with fear. I was caught between the professional need to open that door and go inside, and a powerful, instinctual feeling that I absolutely should not. In the end, I gave up on entering the back room that day. I left the site, and I'm sorry to say I had someone else go in my place a few days later. I don't know what happened after that. This next story is something I experienced more recently at a different site. I was assigned to a job in F-City, Shizuoka, at a house that had experienced a fire. It was a minor one, really, what we'd call a boya, and hadn't caused major damage. It was a single-family home. The fire had been started by the woman who lived there, but for some reason, after the small commotion, she had fled the scene and was nowhere to be found. Only one room was burned, and luckily, no one was injured. I was in that room, hanging new wallpaper. I like to listen to ghost story readings on YouTube while I work, and on this day, I was blasting readings from Gomadango-san, a popular Japanese ghost story YouTuber, on my speaker at high volume. And that's when I heard it. Another voice mixed in with the reading. Huh? Was that a different voice mixed in with the narrator's? I turned the volume down a bit, and there it was, clear as day. The voice of a little girl. It sounded like she was playing, laughing happily. At the time, I sometimes brought my daughter along to job sites to help me out, and she was with me that day. "Hey, was that you talking just now?" I asked her. "That voice isn't me," she replied. It wasn't just me. My daughter had clearly heard the little girl's voice too. I hadn't been told that anyone had died in the fire, but it was obvious that the voice we were hearing did not belong to a living person. I worked at that site for about a week. My daughter came with me for 3 of those days, and on all 3 of those days, we heard the happy, giggling voice of that little girl. For the other 3 days, I worked alone. It was November, so the sun set early. I remember feeling genuinely scared as the room grew dark, but I couldn't stop listening to Gomadango-san's ghost stories, so I just kept working. Finally, I finished up for the day. I left the room and was walking down the stairs. He. I heard it again. The voice of that little girl. It was muffled, but I could hear it perfectly. It was a very strange sensation. As a wallpaper craftsman, I've worked in all kinds of places. Encountering strange sounds and unseen presences has, in a way, become a part of my daily routine. When I swap stories about weird experiences with fellow craftsmen, I often find we've had the exact same experience in the exact same location. "Hey, you're not talking about that site, are you?" they'll say. And sometimes, years later, those same properties will come back around to me for another job. When you're working, you hear things, and we hear them all the time. These strange sounds that you know, 100%, aren't the wind and aren't made by anyone else on site. They're just unexplainable.